Welcome to the WholeHog Podcast.
But my main concern is I just want to do the best damn job I can for the University of Arkansas.
I got a question for you though, Scotty. Do you know that there's other players on our team besides Desi?
Whoever we had on the plane is all we need. Turn that damn shit on.
Now, here's your host, Seth Campbell.
Welcome into the WholeHog Podcast. Seth Campbell joined by Scotty Borderline. Will be joined by Matt Jones over the phone later. Scotty, it's kind of strange. We're past the Thanksgiving holiday, and yet the regular season for football is still happening. Most of the time, it wraps up on that Thanksgiving holiday around then, and then we're really going forward with the Army-Navy game and then conference championship games about this time. But instead, Arkansas getting ready to play Missouri in the borderline rivalry, battle line rivalry, whatever it's called now, sponsored by Shelter Insurance. But it is a big game for both of these teams. Missouri is played really well under Elijah Drinkwitz this year. They are sitting at third in the SEC East with a 4-3 record. And then Arkansas has played, as you know, above what they were picked as well with 3-5 record. It's one of those deals to where you might not know what Arkansas is going to bring to the table because of the COVID issues that they had earlier. Sam Pittman saying that they feel like they're close to 100%, so you hope that's a good thing. But also they're going to be without one of their playmakers, and Rakeem Boyd was a guy that we thought would be all conference coming into the year and would be a workhorse, and really just didn't translate that as he's decided that he's going to opt out of the rest of the season and declare for the draft.
Yeah, the optics on this obviously aren't great, and that caused some. I think you got a little bit of blowback from some folks in the fan base, and to a degree it's kind of understandable. Some of the complaints. You got like 2 games left in the regular season, possibly a bowl game that you can go play in, and there's like if Arkansas does make a bowl game, there's going to be a lot of NFL eyes on bowl games this year. I mean, that's just how it is. But now it seems like if he does get an invite to the Senior Bowl, he's probably going to have to perform pretty well there. But I mean, it's also I think you understand. I think I definitely kind of see both sides. Like I can get why people are upset. It's just kind of. I don't know that give up is the right word, but just kind of, it's opting out. But at the same time, Rakeem's doing what's best for him, and this season clearly hasn't gone the way that he had hoped. And when he decided that he was going to come back for his senior season in December, he had no idea what was waiting on him in 2020. Like, it's just a year literally unlike any other. And he didn't have to come back. Like I think he probably had a pretty solid, NFL draft grade. I would have guessed he'd probably been a middle round type of player that a team might take a chance on to, kind of bolster their backfield. But you just got to remember how good he was, and when he was healthy. I think that's a big thing. Rakeem was hampered by, a tailbone injury in the Ole Miss game, like his first year. And then, he's had shoulder surgery and had some, lower leg issues this year too. So, I mean, I get it from his standpoint. He's trying to protect his investment. Like, it's time for him now, to go get paid and try to set his family up.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you to where I can see it from both sides, Scotty. It does seem, with the optics of it, maybe a little bit like he lost his job and wanted to leave, but also when he, as you said, when he came back, nobody knew what 2020 was going to hold. Nobody knew what this entire year was going to be like. And it's been crazy. We're in December, and it's been absolutely absurd what all of 2020 has contained. And so,
I mean, and the virus has affected him too. Like he missed the LSU game because he was, having to quarantine. So it's like the virus has affected, him personally.
So I think that just the expectations that he had for himself probably didn't pan out as well. And so that's the reason why one of the reasons why, I can't say that's the reason, but that is one of the reasons why he is no longer with the team. And he is going to do what's best for him. He's going to go get work. And we've seen, and this is becoming more and more of a theme, not just this year. I mean, it's prominent this year because you can opt out and still keep your eligibility for the next season. You can play and still keep your eligibility for the next season. Kylan Hill at Mississippi State, though. There's just a few guys that are opting out and just getting ready for the NFL
Terrace
draft.
Marshall at LSU is another one.
Yes.
The receiver. I think Arkansas was his last game
So
that he played.
Those things are happening. It's not rare, but it's also not just common. So, honestly, shout out to Rakeem for everything that he did for the program while he was here for his 3 years. And all right, Scotty, it's going to bring up a little hot topic. Should anybody else wear number 5?
No, absolutely not. That was not to be, a little insensitive to Rakeem's decision, but that was like the first thing I think I texted our work group text. I was like, nobody should ever wear 5 again. Like they should, at some point next season, Arkansas should make that happen where they retire 5, bring D-Mac back, retire 5, and don't let anybody ever wear it again.
Yeah, he was that good.
It's really good. Matt wrote a column about it. I think that's what Matt responded to my text. He was like, "Yeah, I wrote that in HI not too long ago. You should check out that column." And that was before. I think that was maybe before the season or maybe early in the season. But yeah, Darren McFadden was just so special, and Rakeem in, I think last season, I mean, he was special too, but I mean, it's just not in the same class. Like Darren McFadden he's one of a kind, and you gotta honor his legacy that way.
I agree with you. If they want basketball, if you look at the Arkansas basketball team, they've kind of elected to go a different route with honoring highly regarded basketball players by putting their name in the rafters instead of retiring a number. If you wanted to do maybe a Ring of Honor situation, you could possibly do that, but starting a Ring of Honor situation in 2020, I don't know if that's what you want to do. That's up to people that make a higher paycheck than me, but you got to do something. If you don't want to retire the number, you've got to do something to honor the legacy of Darren McFadden. Has he made mistakes post Arkansas and when he was at Arkansas? Sure, but everybody has. Everybody's human. And so I think that to honor the legacy that Darren McFadden had at the University of Arkansas should have been a Heisman winner. I'm only slightly upset at Troy.
Least once.
I'm slightly upset at Troy Smith in 2006, but whatever. Yeah, so I think that back-to-back Doak Walker Award winner, I think that you got to do something to honor D-Mac. But all right, getting back on track here, Scotty. Arkansas, Missouri. Missouri, was a team that had a lot of question marks with Drinkwitz coming in to this game, and they've answered a lot of those questions. They have a winning record on the year, 4-3. Now, yes, they get to play South Carolina and Vanderbilt, and their last game was against Vanderbilt. But they took care of business against Vanderbilt. They didn't even let Sarah Fuller attempt a field goal because Vanderbilt, or even an extra point because Vanderbilt couldn't even score.
Yeah, it's just Vanderbilt's ineptitude, I think.
But you have to give credit to Missouri for having their foot on the pedal and doing what they were supposed to do, because we've seen that sometimes doing what you're supposed to do is not as easy as it looks.
Yeah, and Missouri's they're playing well, and I think won 4 of their last 5, and the only loss in that span was at Florida, which is, everybody's
Arkansas knows.
Yeah, everybody's going into Florida and catching an L this year, but they beat LSU, beat Kentucky, and beat South Carolina 17-10. That was the last game Will Muschamp coached, I believe, and beat Vanderbilt. And I think what Missouri has shown is that they're perfectly fine winning ugly. Like that Kentucky game was 20-10, and then South Carolina was 17-10. And so they're perfectly fine with just kind of slogging it out. And, their defense has been pretty solid. Nick Bolton. One of the things to look for this weekend is just watching the play of the linebackers on both sides of the ball. Nick Bolton is awesome. He's a tackle machine. And then Grant Morgan, only guy in the country with 100+ tackles. So that's definitely going to be something to watch. I think potentially the defense that, maybe creates a turnover or two and, maybe plays a little bit opportunistically. I think that team has got a pretty good shot in this one. Want to see Felipe Franks continue to play well on the road. That hasn't been an issue throughout the season. But Missouri, coming into this game, Missouri's got the number one pass defense in the SEC. I think they're only giving up like 227 passing yards per game, which is pretty solid. I know they haven't played the greatest of quarterbacks outside of Kyle Trask and Mac Jones, but pass defense looks pretty stout. So I think Arkansas's receivers have their work cut out for them too.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting when you go through and look at Missouri's schedule. They've got the losses to Alabama, what was then a ranked Tennessee team, and Florida, as you said. But when you look at their schedule, they've taken advantage of every opportunity in front of them. They were able to beat LSU, something Arkansas couldn't do. They were able to beat Kentucky, Vanderbilt.
Kentucky's a tough team. Like, their offense isn't always clicking on all cylinders, but their defense, kind of like Arkansas's, is pretty opportunistic.
And South Carolina as well, and they were able to take advantage of all of those games. And then they also have another game against Mississippi State that they have to make up at some point in the season, or fingers crossed. They have 2 games that have been postponed against Georgia.
That'll be another win. Mississippi State's a mess.
And Mississippi State. So if they get to play, depending on how the SEC wants to do all that in the next week's games, if they're going to play Missouri or Mississippi State or Georgia, or, it's a cluster in the SEC. So I don't know what all's going to work out there, but if you get this game in and then, you have an opportunity, if you're Missouri under year 1 in Drinkwitz, your 4 wins right now, you could easily win 6. Beat Arkansas and Mississippi State. That's huge. That's bowl eligible on any year, and definitely this year, getting 6 wins in the SEC. So Drinkwitz he's done a fantastic job. And then you also got to believe that maybe, just maybe, this game means a little bit to him. Coming from Northwest Arkansas, from Springdale, kind of under that Malzahn tree before he was at Arkansas State and then bounced around for a while. But you got to believe this one, he's got this one circled because of who it is.
Did you hear what he said about, we've got that rivalry with the team up north that he wasn't going to name, but now we traded it in for another game against a team and we just put an AR in front of it. Did you hear that? Like, he really workshopped that one and it fell flat. Like, that was dorky.
He's a great football coach so far, for sure, in the SEC, but he kind of looks a little dorky. I'm not trying to make fun of him too much.
He was trying to play it cool. Like, he put a lot of thought into it, and he may have, but that one fell flat.
That fell flat. Well, Missouri has tried to make that a thing. Do you remember when Arkansas played in basketball up there in February of last year? And all the student section was wearing shirts that said, like, Arkansas on them, but the A and the R were scratched out to where all you could see was Kansas. Like, they are trying to make, I guess they're trying to make us I don't know. It's like they're living in the past, but in the present at the same time. Like, they want to forget about Kansas and move on to a rivalry with Arkansas, but at the same time, they can't forget about Kansas.
Kansas living rent-free around there.
Literally, Kansas living rent-free. It's even more so than the Texas A&M rivalry, I think, because I don't associate with Kansas fans, so I don't know how big of a loss it was for them to lose Missouri off of their schedule in football and basketball. But Texas A&M, at least in that one, like, it's basically both sides being bitter and petty. From all I can see, and like I said, I might be biased because all I see is Missouri because they're in the SEC, but it seems like they're pretty petty about it, and Kansas is like, hey man, we're moving on. We're going to be terrible in football still and be awesome in basketball.
Yeah, for the most part. Did you listen to the SEC teleconference when Sam Pittman was on? He got asked about his fondest memories of the year that he spent in Missouri, and he said, "I remember this Mexican restaurant named Chevy's, He said, I went there a lot, and I put on some weight in my year at Missouri, eating at Chevy's.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
The SEC,
Which is now closed in Columbia.
Oh, that's sad.
I guess business went south when Sam left town.
Well, Sam probably ate them. Hopefully they didn't have like an all-you-can-eat special or anything. If Sam was talking about he ate so much. Apparently the SEC teleconference was amusing this week.
Yeah, Mike Leach ghosted it.
Can you just do that?
I mean, his time slot came up, and the guy who was filling in for Craig Pinkerton was like, all right, we're going to try to get Coach Mike Leach on the call in just a second. Hang on. And then about 5 or 6 minutes into his 10-minute allotment, he came back on and made the announcement that they couldn't get a hold of him. So no show. He's probably wondering why he's got to talk to anybody on a bye week.
Yeah. That's actually probably really true that he didn't know that he
Either
had
that
to.
he might be out searching for Bigfoot or telling ghost stories from hotels that he stayed in on the recruiting trail.
Man, Mississippi State's a mess right now, but that was expected. This is what happens almost everywhere.
There was nowhere to go but down after that first game.
And this is what happens almost everywhere Mike Leach goes in year one.
He'll probably get it turned around sooner or later.
I don't doubt that he will. I bet you that.
But yeah, I mean, I remember seeing a tweet early in the season, not to turn this into a Mississippi State podcast, but saw this early in the season that like his first couple of years at his last few stops, I mean, he's had a well under 500 record and got some ugly losses, but you can get it turned around year 3 or 4. But those first couple of years are probably going to be pretty long for Mississippi State fans.
Yeah, for sure. And when you got a guy that just likes to talk like he does, sometimes he can talk too much. I think everybody is bringing up the bandwagon tweet right about now. It came to my mind whenever Arkansas beat them, and that was just the second game of the season.
They're photoshopping Ole Miss. I think somebody photoshopped the Ole Miss background into that video, and then photoshopped an Ole Miss logo on his collar shirt. That was pretty fun. They're having some fun with it.
That's awesome. All right, moving back to Arkansas versus Missouri, battle line rivalry. Scotty, I think this game is, this is just from the fan perspective and the person covering. This game's got to mean something to Arkansas. Not simply because this is the rivalry. I think if you didn't have the factor, which we're about to talk about, on the Arkansas staff, if you didn't have that, I think this game would still have to mean something, because Arkansas fans, at least, want to act like, not everybody, but a loud majority on Twitter, which is a funhouse mirror, I get that, want to point out that this isn't a rivalry between Arkansas and Missouri. Missouri has owned you since you joined the SEC. You may not want to hear it, but they have. You've won one time since Missouri has joined the SEC. Yes, some of those Missouri teams were really good. 2 back-to-back SEC East champions. But you lost a game that you shouldn't have in 2016. Then both of your programs were in disarray in 17 and 18. And then 19 as well. You've been owned by Missouri. You were outscored in 2018, 38-0. And then last year was a kind of a close game.
What was that game? That was a rough one.
That 38-0 game?
Yeah.
Wasn't that the game also? Again, we are all about sidetracks today. The post-game press conference was in the rain outside. Yeah,
it was like under a tent. But yeah, it was definitely outside.
You're just like, cool.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. And I didn't take camera equipment. I just carried my phone to get post-game video, and I sat in the front row in like 30-degree weather, and my hands were frozen by the time Chad Morris was done talking about how awful year 1 was.
Yeah, well, it didn't get much better in year 2 either. Your last win was a 28-3 win in 2015 at home. Like, this game needed to mean something to you regardless, because Missouri is laughing at you when you say it's not a rivalry, because they're like, yeah, it's really not. You probably should win something before it becomes a rivalry. And then the added factor that Barry Odom is on this team now, playing against his former school. Barry Odom deserves all the praise in the world. With Arkansas kind of not fading down the stretch, but with losing the game to LSU and then not playing last week, some of the spotlight for him as Broyles Award winner, I think, has faded a little bit, which it could get very bright again if he beats Missouri and they beat him well. But with him on the staff, you have Brad Davis on the staff as well.
And Sam Carter.
Sam Carter. This game means something to them. Without a shadow of a doubt. Just like how we were talking about it means something to Eli Drinkwitz. It means something to Barry Odom as well. And this game has to be a rivalry this year. I'm sorry. I will not take any slander about it not being a rivalry and being a made-up rivalry. Well, guess what? If they made up the rivalry, then so be it. But you got to win. Not you got to win this game, but you need to win this game this year because it's not one of those things of Ohio State, Michigan, where you've had these centuries of history and you can kind of rebound if you're Michigan, even though you haven't won what feels like in this decade.
It's been so long since Arkansas has beaten Missouri that last week on my Facebook memories, I took a picture the only time Arkansas has won the Battle Line Trophy, and Mitch Smothers was standing next to it. And like, it's been a really long time, but like talking about all the coaching connections in this game, I think Brad Davis, Barry Odom, Sam Carter, definitely, I think they're probably taking this personally. Like they're, if they were talking to us, they would probably be like, it's another game, but
right.
You're playing against a lot of kids that and that you care about, and you leave there to try to go prove your worth at Arkansas, and that's exactly what they want to do this weekend. They want to show Missouri that they went to Arkansas and they can make a big impact at another program. And to this point, all three of them really have, especially Barry Odom and Sam Carter. The Arkansas's defense has been outstanding, just with Barry Odom kind of heads up the entire defense, but he's also Arkansas safeties coach. Arkansas's definitely got one of the best safeties in the country with Jalen Catalon. And then, Sam Carter's done a really good job of getting a guy like Hudson Clark to like really believe in himself and believe that he can go and compete with some of the best receivers in this league, and done a pretty good job with the other corners that are still on the roster. Yeah, those guys, they definitely, like I said, they want to go prove their worth, and also they want to do a good job in this game, because if they do and Arkansas comes out with a win, that also strengthens their chances of playing in a bowl. Mm-hmm. And I think that could be really big for player development down the line.
It's kind of funny. You want to get into a bowl game for the extra practices and the extra player development. If you got into, Arkansas with their record right now, I'd probably get into one of the lower tier bowls in the SEC. The problem is you'd probably get an extra week, maybe 2 of practice.
Yeah.
Which is, I'm not trying to shrug that away, but also at the same time, normally when you would get 3 weeks really minimum of extra practice, you're not going to get all of that, because bowl
playing
season,
a really lower tier bowl, you might just have
the next week
just a normal week of practice. But hey,
a bowl game is a bowl game.
Yeah, it beats nothing. That could be. You get, obviously you're gonna prep for whoever your opponent is, but that's a prime time for some of those young guys too to maybe get some valuable reps, and just any practice you can get beyond what's normal. That's going to benefit anyone.
And also, just something to keep an eye on, Ryan Walters is the defensive coordinator for Missouri. He was the defensive coordinator when Barry Odom was head coach. Eli Drinkwitz decided to keep him on as defensive coordinator. So there could be, they're going to change a lot of things from year to year. College football coaches do, but there could be some situations where Barry Odom recognizes something, because he spent so much time with a guy like Ryan Walters, that he might recognize tendencies, what he likes to do on 3rd down and long, all that kind of thing that might play into factor here in this game. Just something to keep an eye on. All right, Scotty, before we wrap up this segment, I really like to see Arkansas get better on 3rd downs on both offense and defense against Missouri. an abysmal performance on third downs on both sides of the ball against LSU. They didn't even convert one against LSU on offense.
For the first time since 2010.
Which, by the way, they won that game against
Yeah.
ECU in the Liberty Bowl. But anyway, I think that Felipe Franks is going to take this team under his wing on offense now that Rakeem Boyd is gone. And you're going to still see the feeding of Traylon Smith because we kind of saw what's going to happen in the LSU game because you didn't have Rakeem Boyd in that game. But I think that there's going to be a lot of RPO action, and I think that there's going to be a lot of times that Felipe Franks is going to pull it, and he's going to run it, and then also he's going to pass it. I'm still curious why they haven't run, it's been 2 weeks since we talked about this, so maybe it was just the last game against LSU where they didn't run this. But the RPO with Franks running towards the sideline and basically throwing it backwards to Traylon Burks.
Right.
I was curious why they didn't run that, but maybe they will. Just something to look out for. I really want the Arkansas offense to be able to be. I think that they'll be able to be better on third down as well, and I think the Arkansas defense will be able to get off the field a little bit more.
Listen to this. So in Arkansas's 3 wins, their third down conversion rate is about 42%. In their 5 losses, it's 25%.
It's a key factor.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
It's a key
Big
factor.
deal. Arkansas needs Felipe Franks to be precise and on the money, make good decisions, which he has on the road for the most part this season.
All right. Well, I'll wrap it up here on segment 1. Don't go anywhere. Those when we come back, Matt Jones is going to join us, talk a little bit more about the Missouri football team. And then later on in the show, Scotty and I are going to talk about our booms, our busts, and our covers for week. Oh, I don't even know what
It's 11, I think.
Week 11.
Mm-hmm.
It's all
I keep
running
up with
together.
that because I post the teleconference audio
Yes.
to our SoundCloud, and every week I put like whatever week it is. So it's week 11.
I appreciate that because
No
I
problem.
got lost for sure. Week 11
Yeah, losing track of time.
in the SEC. Time is just a construct or something like that. Don't go anywhere. Matt Jones joins us here after the break on the WholeHog Podcast.
Want more coverage of your home team? Download the WholeHog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for WholeHog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The WholeHog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today.
Welcome back into the WholeHog Podcast, joined now by Matt Jones from WholeHogSports.com. Matt, thanks for joining us on the WholeHog Podcast. Just want to talk a little bit more about the Arkansas-Missouri game, and Scotty and I were talking about it a little bit beforehand, but this game has got to mean something to Razorback fans, and especially the Arkansas Razorback staff with 3 guys that were former Missouri staffers that are now on the Arkansas football staff.
Well, yeah, it's more than 3, actually. I mean, you've got the 3 full-time coaches in Odom and Brad Davis and Sam Carter, but there are, some other guys, defensive graduate assistants, quality control types who also came here from Missouri. So, yeah, I mean, I think it means something to them. I don't know how much it means to the fan base. I think that, this rivalry is a little contrived. I think it's a much better rivalry in basketball, going back to the Nolan Richardson and Norm Stewart days. But I think every SEC game is meaningful from a football standpoint, and especially as you continue to lose to a team over and over the way that Arkansas has to Missouri the last few years, really since they started playing as SEC opponents. I think the game takes on a little bit of extra meaning. I certainly think it means a lot to this to a portion of the coaching staff, though, given that they recruited most of the Missouri guys who are going to be on the field Saturday.
Yeah, I think that when you go back and you're talking about it a little bit to the fan base, sure, it doesn't have to mean, but you mentioned it. You got to win in a quote-unquote rivalry game. And Arkansas has only won one time since Missouri has joined the SEC. And then looking on the other side, Elijah Drinkwitz is a guy that is from the Northwest Arkansas area, coached here at Springdale High, and has the links to Gus Malzahn and is now at Missouri. So it's got to mean I would think, a lot to him as well.
Yeah, I think so. He was asked about Arkansas earlier in the week, and he grew up in Alma, about 40 miles south of Fayetteville, and said that he grew up watching the Razorbacks, cheering for Houston Nutt's teams, was a fan of them. So, yeah, I think that, there's some meaning, on both sides. Sam Pittman's got some ties to the state of Missouri. That's where he began as a high school coach. His wife, I believe, is from Joplin. I know that they had their first date in Joplin at a Chinese restaurant there. I heard him say one time earlier this year. He went to school just across the state line in Pittsburgh State. And, for both of these coaches, I mean, Drinkwitz was a candidate at Arkansas last year and kind of pulled his name out of I don't know how serious of a candidate he was, but basically about the time that he was hired at Missouri was the time that Pittman was hired at Arkansas. So there's a lot of off-field stuff, I think, that feeds into this.
When you go and you look at the SEC standings, you'd be surprised, or it kind of shocked me a little bit when you go and you look, and then you see Missouri's name is third, right behind Florida and Georgia in the SEC East, coming off of, this is being the first year with Elijah Drinkwitz, but yeah, they've had maybe a little bit easier path than, say, like the Razorbacks, but they've been able to take advantage of all the opportunities that have been in front of them.
Yeah, I think so. They both of these teams have overachieved, I think, this year based on what everybody thought they would do. Arkansas was picked 7th in the West, and Missouri was picked 6th in the East, only ahead of Vanderbilt. So I think both of them have had a really good type season under first-year head coaches. Missouri's been a little up and down. They didn't play too well to start the season, lost to Alabama and Tennessee, but really since that point they've won 4 or 5 games. I don't know if they've really beaten just a great quality opponent, but they've had a really good year, a lot better than I thought they would have.
Yeah, 4 wins, and as you said, they took advantage of playing Kentucky and South Carolina and Vanderbilt, and I'm looking for that 4th win.
LSU was their other win.
Yes.
LSU, that was their first win of the year, and that was the game that was supposed to be played in Baton Rouge and got moved to Columbia kind of last minute because of the hurricane coming in. And I think that was really, the point where you could see that LSU was not the LSU team that they were last year, because Missouri's not really that great offensively, especially not passing the ball. But Connor Bazelak came in that game and just torched LSU. And that was the game where you had the great picture of Bo Pelini walking off the field with his head in his hands. Like, what do I do with this defense? And so that was their other win. That's really their most notable win this year. And I think if LSU is your most notable win, you don't really have a lot of notable wins,
Right. Well, what do they do well on offense, Matt?
Well, they run the ball. I mean, Larry Roundtree is a senior running back. He's had a couple of, pretty good games against Arkansas. I think he had a 100-yard plus game a couple of years ago in the rain up in Columbia. I think last year he had about 88 in Little Rock. Scored the first touchdown in that game last season at War Memorial that Missouri won. And I think, you mentioned Drinkwitz has got the ties to Gus Malzahn. A lot of people think that goes back to Springdale. It actually doesn't. He started coaching at Springdale High the year after Malzahn left and became Arkansas's offensive coordinator. But they linked up in Auburn. I think Drinkwitz was like a quality control type coach at Auburn on their national championship team. Then he coached with them at Arkansas State as well. And so there are some Gus Malzahn, philosophies, I think, in what he does. I don't think it's a carbon copy of the Malzahn offense. I mean, he's worked with a number of other offensive coaches, guys like Brian Harsin. He was with him at Arkansas State and Boise State for a few years. So I think he's taken a little bit from, all these different places that he's been. But I say all that to say that it is Malzahn-esque in that they want to run the football. And so they want to establish the run. I think that, it's kind of like what Arkansas saw with Tennessee a few weeks ago. You remember Sam Pittman making the comments about Jim Chaney, that if he could run the ball 75 times a game, he'd do it. I think if Missouri could run the ball, 75, 80% of the time, that's what they would like to do. The games where they've been pretty good, they've been able to, run the ball well on first and second down and, not put themselves in a lot of deep yardage situations. I don't think that's where they're really good. I think they're really good when Larry Roundtree can, get 3 yards on first down, maybe 3 or 4 yards on second down and put them in good situations. And that's the type of offense that they want to be. That they won't wow you throwing the football. They've had some pretty good receivers who, at least in the Arkansas games over the last few years, have had big games. And Barrett Bannister's back, but that was probably the biggest game of his career against Arkansas last season. But you look at their receiver numbers; they're really not that great this season. They don't throw the ball particularly well. If they can't run the football, then their offense is in trouble.
And then on the flip side, for their defense, they're led by linebacker Nick Bolton, an outstanding player.
Yeah, he is. And what they do is they're still doing a lot of the same. I mean, basically, they're running the same defense that they ran last year. They kept the same defensive coordinator who had been with Barry Odom, actually has been with Odom going back to their days in Memphis about 6-7 years earlier. And so it's very similar. It's going to be that 3 safety type look that we saw Missouri run so much last season. And I think that there's probably maybe a little bit of an advantage for Arkansas knowing that defense. I mean, the defense that they see Saturday, that's going to be the same defense that they saw in the preseason. It's going to be the same type of defense that, their scout team's going against during the week. So there's a lot of familiarity, I think, between going back to what you were talking about, the coaching staff. When you think about Barry Odom's the defensive coordinator, and Sam Carter is the cornerbacks coach, and Michael Scherer is a former linebacker at Missouri who's now a quality control type guy with Arkansas. There's a lot of familiarity, I think, with this Missouri defense, not only the scheme, but the personnel too.
All right, Matt. Well, thanks for joining us here on the Whole Hog Podcast. The Razorbacks are playing Missouri at 11 a.m. Thanks for your time, Matt.
All right. Appreciate it, guys.
Well, don't go anywhere, because when we come back, Scotty and I are going to give our booms, our busts, and our covers for Arkansas versus Missouri coming up. So don't go anywhere.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
Welcome back in Whole Hog Podcast. Boom, bust, or cover time. Scotty, the Razorbacks are on their revenge tour of coaches that they had on the coaching search, I guess you will. Mike Leach, they won against him. Lane Kiffin, they won against him. It's time to exact and pull off the trifecta, if you will, if they can beat Elijah Drinkwitz and the Missouri Tigers. You feel like those 3 guys were somewhere on a list of coaches that the Arkansas football program wanted to hire. And, maybe not have offered the job, but interviewed for the job anyway. All right. Boom, bust, or cover time. That means that what we're going to do is we're going to go through, we're going to pick a player either for Arkansas or Missouri that we think is going to boom. Kind of think of it like fantasy football in a way. A player that has a fantastic game, a player that busts, that we think will bust, and then a player that covers. And by cover, I mean they're going to do what they normally do, and what they normally do might be for Traylon Burks that he goes for 100 yards and scores a touchdown. Well, that is a pretty good day for most guys, but that's kind of what Traylon Burks just does. So that's kind of how this is going to work. I will go first with my boom, and I'm going to go with a guy that lays the boom in Jalen Catalon. When he comes back in the second half, I think he is going to be a difference maker for the Arkansas Razorbacks in the secondary. And how Matt was talking about earlier in the show, Missouri doesn't like to pass, He's going to take away any hopes that they really had of wanting to pass. And he's going to be able to shut them down from that safety position. He's going to make those guys think twice about coming over the middle and hopefully the good Lord willing, the creek don't rise, that he's going to not get ejected for targeting for the third time this year.
My boom would probably be, I'm just going to stick with Felipe Franks, just given the success that he's had on the road this season. He's done a really terrific job just taking care of the football. I mean, he has, for the most part this season, like whether he's playing at home or on the road, but all 4 of his picks have come at home, and he's got a flawless touchdown interception ratio on the road. And just seems to me to just be a little bit maybe more locked in away from home, because that everybody in the stadium's against you, so you got to be hyper focused on what you're trying to get accomplished.
That's a good pick. All right, boom. Felipe Franks for Scotty, Jalen Catalon for me. Be interesting to see how the Arkansas defense responds as well without Jalen Catalon in that first half. See if they can still limit the Missouri Tigers. All right, we're going to move on to bust. My bust for this game, I believe, is going to be the Arkansas backup running back, whoever it is, whether they elect to go with TJ Hammonds, Dominique Johnson, whoever they're going to elect to go with. We saw in the LSU game, the backup running back just wasn't used a whole lot. Traylon Smith is going to get the bulk of the carries, and that's really going to be where this conversation hints. Yes,
I think he can handle it.
TJ Hammonds was an explosive change of pace against LSU. I'm just really wary about him because what over the past 3-4 years have we learned from TJ Hammonds that we should trust him with backup running back carries?
But he made a couple big plays against LSU, though.
Yeah, exactly. He made a really big play against Coastal Carolina 2018. They won Arkansas the game. But then what did he do after that? What has he done this year? So I caution, just pump the brakes on the TJ Hammonds train. Now, if he comes out and proves me wrong, I'll be the first one to say it. But Traylon Smith, we saw, can handle the amount of carries, and I think that he will. So I am not very bullish on the Arkansas backup running back.
I think my bust is going to be Arkansas's pass rush. Missouri is tied for third in the league this season. They've only allowed 13 sacks in 7 games. I mean, that's less than 2 a game, and Arkansas hasn't just gotten a ton of pressure on the quarterback at any point this year. I think Arkansas's best chance of probably making an impact up front is probably in the run game. Just curious to see how some of the guys who are coming out of quarantine, get back, or are they in a groove, or is it going to take them a while to get reaccustomed to, the physical nature of playing in the trenches. And I expect Jonathan Marshall to have a pretty solid game. If Arkansas does tally maybe a sack or two, I would assume it would probably be Jonathan Marshall or maybe a guy like Julius Coates. But I think Missouri's probably going to try to get the ball out pretty quick, get the ball out in space when they do throw the ball.
Yeah.
Basilak's playing pretty well as of late, but Larry Roundtree is the guy that you gotta really focus on. If Arkansas can disrupt the run game, I think Arkansas's got a really good shot.
I think that Missouri having a decent offensive line and the fact that they don't like to pass the ball just a ton, and then when they do, they can get it out quick, helps with the sack numbers. And Arkansas has just not been able to put pressure with their front 3 or 4, depending on whatever front they run. And that hasn't been the strong suit of their defense, and they know that, and they haven't played towards that. Hopefully, Arkansas will have enough defensive linemen healthy that they can, in good enough shape, that they can run a 4-man front to help stop the run against Missouri. So we'll have to see how Barry Odom elects to do that. All right. Cover for me, Scotty, is going to be somebody you mentioned earlier, Felipe Franks. I think Franks is going to have a game that we've come to expect him to have on the road. You mentioned it, that he's got a perfect touchdown to interception ratio on the road.
Yeah.
That's a big reason why Arkansas has been able to stay in games on the road. And I think that he's going to continue to do that. I don't think he's going to throw another interception against Missouri. And it's almost what we've come to expect from Felipe. And he's going to do enough. And it's not surprising anymore when he throws those long bombs on target to Mike Woods or Traylon Burks or whoever it is. And I think you might see one of those too. Not going to demote Felipe Frank's game any, because he is a big key to why the Razorbacks are sitting at 3 wins. But I think it's almost going to be like, oh yeah, Felipe threw the ball 60 yards down the field, maybe while he was under duress too, and hit Mike Woods in stride, because that's happened. And it's such a luxury, but I'm going to pick him to cover. He's going to have a good game, but not as good or outstanding, I guess I should say, is what I think Jalen Catalan could do in the second half.
Yeah. To your point on Felipe, is just his down the field passing. Pro Football Focus has him as the 3rd highest graded quarterback on passes 20+ yards downfield. And I don't do the 20+ yards downfield, but I do 16+ for some reason. Maybe I'll change it to 20 next year. But on those 16+ yard throws, he's 21 of 36 for 851 yards and 8 touchdowns this season. Over the last 4 games, he's 12 of 17 with 5 touchdowns. And against LSU, he hit 5 of 6 for 245 yards and a score.
That's impressive, to say the least.
Each of the last 2 games, he set a season high for passing yards on throws on deep balls.
So that could be something else that we could see with Arkansas having an extra week to prepare for Missouri. Not necessarily on the field, but the coaching staff. Maybe Kendall Browse incorporates that a little bit more. Not the fact that they weren't incorporating it a decent amount, but the fact that maybe you see Felipe Franks take a lot of deep shots in this game against Missouri and see if they don't pay off. That'd be interesting. All right, Scotty, who's your cover?
I think it's just going to be Traylon Smith feeling more comfortable than he did in the LSU game at being like Arkansas's every down back. At some points in the game, I think he got flagged for a couple penalties. I think there was a pass interference penalty when Mike Woods got laid out and the LSU defensive back got disqualified for targeting. Those penalties offset because Traylon Smith was flagged for pass interference, like way away from the play. It was just kind of unnecessary, I think. And then there was the tripping. There was a tripping penalty that he got. I think he was maybe just trying to do a little bit too much, maybe pressing a little bit. And I think you'll see that he's more comfortable in pass protection. That's what I asked him on Tuesday, where he felt like he'd grown the most since the start of the season. And I think it's in pass protection. He's, picking up, where the blitz is coming from. He's identifying corner blitzes when they're coming. So I think you'll see him settle into that a little bit more. And, I think you'll see that he's a little bit more – I think he'll be a little bit more smooth, when Felipe Franks is targeting him. I think he only had 2 catches on 6 targets a couple weeks ago, and a couple of those plays were on him. He probably should have caught those passes and gotten some big yards after catch.
Yeah, that's a key part of the Browse offense, is having the running back being able to catch it out of the backfield. And I remember one instance in particular to where he just dropped a ball and wasn't able to pick up a first down on a critical 3rd down.
Yeah.
And so I think that you will probably be right. He'll be a little more comfortable. They'll rep that this week. Him knowing that he is the guy. I think that'll translate into him being able to just be prepared and know that. And with those extra reps comes the fact that he is going to catch the ball out of the backfield and have the practice with that. All right, Scotty. Battle line rivalry week coming to a close here. Arkansas, Missouri, 11 a.m. Arkansas trying to move to 4 wins on the season. Missouri trying to move to 5. Well, that'll do it here for us on the WholeHog Podcast. Stay tuned. Right now, Arkansas is scheduled to play, I guess it's not technically official, but the only team that they have left on the roster or on the schedule to play would be Alabama next week. So we'll keep you updated with all of that information as well on WholeHogSports.com. Big shout out to Matt Jones for joining us on the show today. You can check him out at WholeHogSports.com as well. And if you like this content that you're getting right now, subscribe, because we have all kinds of Razorback sports content coming out on this podcast channel. Basketball Podcast in Mid-America has started up. Scotty and I do that one. Basketball team looking pretty good. They're off to a 3-0 start. And then women's basketball gets talked about as well. football reaction show. And then whenever baseball season rolls around, we'll get to that as well. So lots of stuff coming from this podcasting network. So just hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for all of the latest and greatest Razorback news. Well, for Scotty Bordelon, I am Seth Campbell saying thank you for joining us. So long, and we will see you back here next week.